Welcome to another edition of Well-Adjusted Mama. I'm your host, Dr. Laura Brayton, and today's guest is a friend of mine, locally based in Jersey City, New Jersey, Laura Lacey. Laura Lacey is a licensed massage therapist and a certified nutritional consultant. She has been specializing in wellness for women and babies for over 15 years. Laura studied massage at the Swedish New York, and got her nutritional certification from Hawthorne University. She wrote her nutritional thesis on baby nutrition in the first year. Laura's practice is based in Jersey City. She sees private clients for both massage and nutrition and regularly teaches baby massage and baby nutrition workshops at her studio, local hospitals, and parenting centers. Laura also offers online courses for clients on infant massage and baby nutrition in the first year at her website, LauraLacey.com. That's LauraLacey.com. Welcome, Laura.
Thank you for having me. This is going to be so much fun.
It is. So today we're going to focus on baby nutrition in the first year. And I think this is such an important topic. I mean, that first year of development in a baby's life is hugely important. There's so much going on, and nutrition plays a big part in that. And there's a lot of misinformation out there about what to feed a baby in that first year. So I'm excited to have you as an expert. So let's talk about what are the nutritional needs of a newborn.
Well, first of all, I really want to reiterate what you said. And babies grow more in their first year than they do at any other time in their lives. So there's a lot of building that's going on, and that takes a lot of good nutrition. And there's some specific nutrients that all babies need. And when I talk about them, you'll notice that a lot of them work together. For example, babies need iron, and they need that for brain development. But they also need vitamin C, because with vitamin C, what that does is it helps absorb the iron. Then, of course, they need calcium to help their bones to grow, because they're growing so tremendously much. And vitamin D actually helps calcium to be absorbed, and it also helps with bone growth. And, of course, we need zinc, which is great for building a healthy immune system, and vitamin A, which is good for vision and also healthy skin. Vitamin E is great for their nervous system. And vitamin K is used for to help with blood clotting. And most babies, especially if they were born in a hospital, will be given a shot of vitamin K at birth, and that's to prevent bleeding in the brain. So that's also a really, really important nutrient. Yeah, and I think as far as these nutrients, most babies, if they are breastfed, you're going to find that moms really need to keep their diet really healthy, because whatever they're eating is going to go into their breast milk. And so it's important that, not only that they're, for the nutrients for their baby, but also to keep their energy and their strength up.
Well, that's true. During pregnancy, the baby leaches a lot of nutrients from mom in order to make itself.
Right.
And after birth, yeah, go ahead.
And I'm sorry, after birth, it's the same thing happens, except that, it's the breast milk that gets the nutrients first.
Right.
So in either case,
is always taken care of, right. So mom's diet is hugely important. Let's talk about the differences for between breastfeeding and formula feeding to meet a nutritional needs for a newborn.
Okay, with breastfeeding, you really need to make sure that you're eating well. And I like to say, people always say, what does that mean? Mm-hmm. I think that when you're eating, if your plate is very colorful, can probably be assured that you're eating well. You don't want your plate to be all brown and white. We want some reds and greens and yellows in there too, because all of these different colors of foods actually have different properties to boost your wellness. So with breast milk, that it's very important what mom eats. With formula feeding, formula is made with lots of vitamins and nutrients and supplements already in it. The difference between breast milk and formula is that breast milk is actually made individually. It's like an individually made substance, and it's made specifically for your baby. So and one of the big things is that it has all of the, formula has all of the vitamins and minerals and nutrients that breast milk has. But in addition to that, breast milk also has antibodies, which are not built into formula. We definitely believe that breast is best. We would encourage all moms to breastfeed because it just gives babies that additional nutritional boost. And even if moms can only breastfeed for a short amount of time, even if it's only, a couple of days or a week, that first breast milk that comes in, the colostrum, is something that really has a lot of good qualities to it, antibodies, and really it's really nutrient dense. So we really like babies to have that first off. There are, of course, times when it is not appropriate for a mom to be breastfeeding. If a mom is not well, if she's like on chemo or something, then she's not going to be able to breastfeed. And if that's the case, I think she also needs to know that if she's formula feeding, that formula is made in a way to mimic breast milk and is very nutritionally dense. Formula needs to meet nutritional recommendations from the Committee of Nutrition of the American Academy of Pediatrics. So it's not, there is a standard for it. And I think people should be aware of that too in case they have to breastfeed or in case they're supplementing with formula. So,
what I love about breast milk is, like you mentioned, it's like individual for the baby. It's customized.
Oh, yeah.
The mother's body gets chemicals from the baby's saliva on her nipples that tells her body how to make the next batch of milk for the baby. It's like so fascinating how this is something that you just can't duplicate.
No, you cannot duplicate it. Breast milk is just really very special. And then there's the whole, thing of the smell of breast milk. Your baby knows your smell because they know the smell of your breast milk. It sort of encompasses all the other senses. It's just not, taste. It's also the smell and the feel and all of that. There's a lot that goes along with breastfeeding, and I definitely would always encourage everyone who can to do that. And, it's like, I think, thank goodness we're past that era where, everything scientific is good, and so if it's manufactured, it must be better, which is what happened in like the 40s and almost all the way through the 50s. In the 60s, we started seeing a change, but for a long time, people had gotten away from breastfeeding. Moms had gotten away from breastfeeding and were formula feeding because they thought, this is scientifically great, and so it must be better. And it's actually the opposite, and thank goodness we've gotten back to recognizing the importance of breastfeeding.
That's right. And even, any vitamin or mineral that's chemically manufactured is not going to be absorbed the same way that something that's from nature is going to be absorbed in the body.
Absolutely, absolutely. And with that in mind, just as an aside, when you are taking supplements, you can take too many supplements, if you're taking, just the pills. But if you're taking, eating foods that contain these supplements, the same amount of vitamin, that would never happen.
Right.
Yeah, it would never happen. I mean, if you were taking, vitamin C, well, not vitamin C is probably not a good one, can pee that out. But for example, if you were taking that in a supplement form, at a certain point you could be taking too many. But if you were eating oranges and lemons and citrus fruits, you wouldn't. Your body knows how to regulate that, and you would be fine.
It just goes back to having that, whole food-based diet to really get our nutrients from. And that's all types of vitamins and the phytonutrients you mentioned that make up the different colors and different minerals. There's just so much out there in nature, and the more variety in our diet, the more exposure to these different nutrients.
And I think also the more variety that you have, the more variety that is in a mother's diet, the more variety her baby gets if she's breastfeeding. And so that sets them up for just a really good, healthy beginning in life. Mm-hmm. So it's really what we eat is just so important.
It really is. And so, leading me to the next question, what is the best way, when and what is the best way to start introducing solid foods to an infant?
Solid foods are very interesting. First of all, when we start a baby on solids, it's always a big deal. It's the big adventure. I always call it the big adventure of solid food because, a solid food really should not be introduced before 6 months. The American Academy of Pediatrics states 6 months, and that's what I base my teachings on. It's also 6 months. Of course, there are always exceptions. Some babies develop faster than others, and you're going to have babies that are going to be starting solids a little bit earlier, maybe at 5 months. But earlier than that, you really don't want to do that. And one of the big reasons not to introduce solids before 6 months is because the baby's digestive system isn't fully developed, and that can actually set your baby up for allergies. So we'll talk about that, I think, a little bit later, the allergy factor. But solids. Now think about this. For 6 months, your baby has just opened up its little mouth and liquid is poured down its throat. It's just very easy. There's not a lot of effort involved. Once the baby starts on solids, it actually has to learn to move the food from the front of its mouth to the back of its mouth and down its throat. So it's a little bit more work involved. Solids, though, when you start a baby on solids, they're not really solid. I mean, we're not going to go from, liquidy milk to an apple. Anything solid is really in a pureed form. And when we start babies on solids, we want to start with the most liquidy liquid puree. And usually when you start babies on solids, you start them in stages. And the first stage is always the super, super liquid stage. The second stage is a little thicker puree. And the third stage is really chunky. So it's all about texture. And also, I think it's important for moms to realize that even when they start their babies on solids, let's say at 6 months, their baby's main nutrition is still going to be coming from breast milk or formula. That initial, starting on solids is really getting the baby used to foods, but it's really the nutritional value of that food. I mean, it should be high, but what the baby's actually getting is not going to be a significant amount of nutrients in their diet. They're not going to be able to just switch from breast milk to solid. It's a transition. So for the first 6 months, we're going to be doing breast milk or formula, and then we're going to start introducing some solids. So you're going to start introducing purees. I like to start with pureed vegetables and start with either carrots or sweet potatoes or squash because they're slightly sweet. You could start with fruits, but I just don't, and it's a personal preference because they're so sweet, and I feel like you don't want to set them up for that, I need my sugar cravings.
Right.
So I start them with vegetables first, and then I start them on fruits, and then I do grains last. So,
what about meat?
Beg your pardon?
What about meats?
I don't do meats until like the third stage of this. And the reason why meats and egg whites, salt, all of these, well, either they have salt, obviously, but meat is very high protein, and meat like egg whites can be a little bit hard on a baby's kidneys. So I like to till I know that their system is really developed. Okay. There's definitely, I know that if you buy commercial baby food. Some of those foods do contain meat. And you might want to try it like in stage 2. And normally with the stages, what I do is I'll start the baby on just really liquidy vegetables for the first go-round. And then in about 3 weeks, maybe 4 weeks, just depending how the baby is reacting. If it's like, wow, I really love this and I want more, then I'll bump it up and make it a little bit thicker. And at that point, you might want to introduce meat. But you have to understand the meat is still going to have to be really mushy.
Right.
So what I suggest you do is the meat should be very well cooked.
Like a liver.
And then I would put it in I would puree it in a processor with either breast milk or formula. And that's how I would serve my baby meat.
Right. To make it really, really soft, of course, that's important.
Really liquidy. I mean, you want this, they'll get the nutrients, but you just really want something something that they can swallow easily.
Right.
So yes, you can do that. I know that traditionally we have been serving our babies grains as the first food, which is usually rice cereal. And lately there's been some discussion about that. And I think the thought right now is to serve grains later in the process and not as a first food, because grains have phytates and they're very hard to digest and they inhibit mineral absorption. So that being said, there are, of course, people that come from a grain culture. A lot of people from, a lot of the world actually, Africa, the Middle East, Asia, have a very grain-based diet. And when we start our babies on food, solid food, one of the things that we want to do is we want to introduce them to the diet of our culture. So if that's the case and you are eating a lot of rice and that's part of your main staple of your diet, then of course you'll want to feed your baby rice. And if that's the case, what I always suggest is that you soak the rice first. I treat it pretty much the way I treat beans, where I soak the rice overnight. That leaches out the phytates. And once the rice is soaked, it also cooks much faster and it's much easier to digest. That's my thought on rice. But I always, feeding babies is a process. It's an adventure. It's a lot of times it's 1 spoon in and a half a spoon out. Mm-hmm. But and I think that the other thing I'd like to mention is that babies grow at their own pace, and it's don't be comparing your baby to your first baby or your neighbor's baby. Your baby is an individual, and if your baby's going to start eating solids at 5 months or 6 months or 7 months or even 8 months, it's all fine. It's your baby, and they all develop at a different rate.
Right. That's so true. It's so good to have that awareness, and a lot of that also comes down to mother's intuition. So
right.
Perhaps despite what your pediatrician is recommending, if your intuition tells you something different, then it's good to get a second opinion.
Absolutely. I mean, and I would always say, go with your gut first. Listen to your pediatrician, and then if you have questions, call a nutritionist, because pediatricians sometimes don't have that vast of knowledge in nutrition. They're great with everything else, but that's really not their main focus, and so sometimes it helps just to get another opinion.
Definitely. Because I do sometimes hear, pediatricians recommending rice cereal across the board at 4 months.
Right.
And that disturbs me because I know that can create some inflammation in that child's gut and lead to, chronic health issues in the future.
Right. Yeah, it's not, like I said, I mean, I totally agree with you. It's really not the best thing. And I think that there have been studies done lately and people are starting to become aware that maybe, rice cereal is not the best. Now, also speaking of rice cereal, we used to always just buy the rice cereal and mix it with water and there it goes. But right now, I would suggest if you are going to be doing rice that you would do brown rice, which has more nutritional value, and you soak it, and then you cook it and mix it with breast milk or formula. Normally when we're making baby food, especially in the first 2 stages, we're going to be mixing it with breast milk or formula or water, just to give it that very loose consistency.
And I would also think that it's probably best to make your own homemade baby formula as opposed to buying store-bought.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, I feel that you should always make your own baby food. My only thing is that there are some very good organic baby foods out there, and those you might want to use if you're traveling or, on occasions. I don't think that they should be the staple of your baby's diet. But they are, there's a reason why they're out there and they're good. If they're not organic, I would really stay away from them. I know we're supposed, there's labeling on foods and we are supposed to be able to read the label and know what's in our foods. But when I do my workshops, I always have a couple of jars of baby food with me, and we read the ingredients, and maybe the ingredients sound okay, but then we look at the expiration date, and the expiration date goes out maybe 3 years, and it's sort of like, excuse me, I'm sure there's something else in here for this to be shelf-worthy for 3 years.
Wow,
so
that's crazy.
It is crazy. It's really crazy. And that's not labeled. Everything does not have to be on the label. I think moms need to be aware of that. So, you be as diligent as you can. And I think it's so easy to make your own baby food. All you need
tell us
is
about it, yeah.
It's just easy. You have a pot. You either bake it or steam the food. You put it in and you blend it. And you can use a blender or a food processor. And there are all these like baby cook things that will steam and puree the food all in one if you really don't cook and you're not, the kitchen is a foreign room to you. You can do that. But otherwise, it's just very easy to do, and you can make batches and you can freeze them in little 2-ounce containers and you're good to go.
Mm-hmm. And if you put it in the fridge, how long is it good for? Like a couple days?
Yeah, it's good for a couple of days. What I normally do is I don't think moms need to be short order cooks. So if you're doing, sweet potatoes, make a bunch of sweet potatoes, keep some aside for the family. You can use it as sides. You can use it in soups. And the rest of it, I would just put in these little 2-ounce containers, which is basically all you're going to need, and freeze them. And then when you need them, the day before, you can either just put them in the fridge and let it defrost in the fridge, or, put it in a saucepan of warm water and let it defrost like that. The only way you should not defrost it is in a microwave. Microwaves, first of all, they cook unevenly, so it's defrosted unevenly, and they could change the chemical composition of the food. So I stay away from microwaves.
That makes sense. So let's talk about what could happen for a child to get food allergies. We had kind of hinted at that earlier.
Yeah.
Your gut. So can you tell me more about that?
Sure. Food allergies can happen whether you're breastfeeding, formula feeding, or have actually started your baby on solids. And one of there's symptoms that you would see. You would see your baby would start wheezing and coughing when they don't really have a cold. They'd have a really runny nose. They could get hives or welts or maybe rashes. So when these are things to watch out for. Or your baby could just get very cranky when they normally have a really great disposition. Then moms generally have a gut feeling of when there's something wrong. So if you're breastfeeding and your baby starts showing symptoms of an allergy, then what I would suggest you do is you watch what you're eating. And it's usually because you're eating gassy foods like broccoli or cabbage, or you're eating spicy foods, or you're eating a new food that your baby's not really used to. So what I suggest always is just, think about what you've been eating, eliminate whatever that is, and then that should take care of the problem.
Mm-hmm.
Formula-fed babies.
Common ones. Common
Beg your
foods
pardon?
that there's common allergenic foods that moms are usually recommended to start with as far as elimination, like dairy, gluten, and soy.
Right.
Have you seen that as well?
I have, and those are big ones. And like I said, the gassy foods are also in there too. And those, it's just when you're breastfeeding, it's just being really aware of any changes in your baby and changes in your diet.
Mm-hmm. Because those a lot of times are correlated. So even keeping a journal of like, what did I eat today when this baby was off?
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. Food diaries are a great thing anytime. But if you're concerned about, what you're eating, and if what you're eating could be breast milk, then it's absolutely a great time to be doing a journal. Mm-hmm. If you're formula feeding and you think that your baby is allergic, then I would talk to your pediatrician, and just probably the formula would be changed. There are lots of different types of baby formulas, so I would suggest you talk to your pediatrician about that. Mm-hmm. And if your baby is on solids, one of the things that I had mentioned is maybe if you've started your baby on solids before they really should start on solids, like if they've started them on solids at 4 months, that could cause allergies because their system isn't really ready for foods, and when it gets to the gut sees this food as something foreign and starts kicking it out and causing symptoms. So I know that I've heard, and I don't know, you've probably heard people say, oh, your baby's not sleeping through the night. I would give them rice cereal at 3 and 4 months. That does not work. It's a bad idea. First of all, it doesn't work. Secondly, it could cause more problems than what you've got now. And, just give it time. Your baby will sleep through the night eventually, and everything will work out. Just be patient. Mm-hmm. If your baby has started on solids at like 6 months and the digestive system is fine and everything, but they're showing allergies, the way to avoid that is when you feed your baby solids to start, I use what I call the 4-day rule. For example, you're going to start your baby with carrots as the first food. I would feed my baby carrots for 4 days. Mm-hmm. And then I would do another food. If in those 4 days there's a reaction, then you eliminate that food.
Right.
So let's say we start with carrots. You do 4 days of carrots, everything's great. You do peas. You do 4 days of peas, and everything's great. Then you can mix the two, and the next time they can have carrots and peas. But if the 4 days gives you a chance to see if there's a negative reaction to any food. So that's one of the best ways to avoid allergies. Then there are also, like you were saying, foods that are commonly allergenic, and those would include dairy, milk and dairy. Eggs could be allergenic, peanuts, of course, citrus fruits. You might not want to do that for the first year. A lot of the leafy greens like spinach and kale, I would wait until stage 3. But if and always be aware that when you cook these, if you're steaming the leafy greens, mm-hmm. not to use that liquid that the food was steamed in to feed your baby because it's high in nitrates, and that can cause a lot of gas and tummy disorders. So that's pretty much, how I would. That's pretty much what I have to say on allergies. Just really, really be aware of what you're feeding your baby and really watch for any reactions and just eliminate things that might cause allergies. Eggs are an interesting food because a lot of times it's on the no-no list. Don't feed your baby eggs. Mm-hmm. And really, we don't want to feed our babies egg whites because they're high in protein and the whole issue of, too hard on the kidneys. However, the egg yolk is really high in cholesterol, which is really good for a baby's brain development. Right. So you may want to just do a hard-boiled egg, take out the yolk, mix that with some breast milk, and try feeding that to your baby and watch to see if there's a reaction. If there's no reaction, it's probably a good food.
Right. That's true. I mean, once you rule out the allergy component, then you can see that it's highly nutritious for the brain and the entire nervous system.
Right. It's really, really good for them. So, yep.
So I was going to say there's two things that came up that when you were speaking that I thought was really brilliant. The 4-day, when you're introducing a new food, you do only that food for 4 days. That allows you to see any reaction from an IgE, which is like an immediate allergy response, as well as an IgG, which is more of a delayed allergy response. And doing, 4 days is a sufficient amount of time to really fully see how a baby reacts to that food. So I think that's really smart because if you keep introducing a new food every day and the baby does have a reaction, it's not as clear if it's the food that baby just ate or if it's something they ate 3 days prior.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
The other thing I wanted to ask you is you mentioned there's 3 different stages of introducing solid foods, and that was based on like the consistency as well as the type of food. Is there a certain timeline of age for a baby? Or starting at 6 months, when does typically stage 2 and stage 3 begin?
I generally cycle each stage through about a 3-week period. So I would stay on stage 1 for about 3 weeks. Then I would go to stage 2, and I would do 3 weeks, and I would just sort of watch my baby's development. If my baby is really eating a lot of solid food and really craving solid food, then I might just go do a week, 2 weeks, and then go to stage 3. With solid foods, you're really going to be, it's a balance. You're going to start with, I really want to say this. When I feed my baby solid food, I always start with the milk feed first, okay? Because since your baby's going to get most of their nutrition from the milk, you want to make sure they get filled on the milk first, and then they eat the solids. What will happen closer to a year when the baby starts becoming almost a year old? You're going to see that your baby's going to be drinking less milk and eating more solids. It's really up to the baby. Moms get really, really nervous about this. It's like, are they eating enough? Are they eating enough? Your baby will demand more solid food, and that's when you give them more solid food.
Right.
It's really very baby-driven.
Right.
So, So that's how I work with the 3 stages. The first stage is probably the longest stage, usually 3 weeks. And then the second stage can be 2 to 3 to 4, 3 weeks, and then the third stage. And by the time they're at the third stage, they're going to be very close to a year old, and by the time they're that old, they're going to really be eating what you're eating.
Mm-hmm. And I've even seen sometimes with babies that are developing maybe a little slower, at 6 months old, they're not quite ready to start eating solids. They want to stay on breast milk only.
Right.
And so I think that's also good to be aware that not all babies need, it's their 6-month birthday, let's start giving them solids.
No. Babies are sort of, babies develop at their own rate. And if at 6 months, if they're ready, fine. But if they're not ready until 7 months, that's fine too.
Yeah, it's fine. It's all good. Ideally, that entire first year of their life, they ideally would be getting the breast milk. and then it's just adding in some of these solids as they go along and are getting to that developmental stage where they're ready and open and willing to go to the next stage.
Right, and babies are really interesting. Sometimes you have a baby that at 6 months is like, they have their teeth, okay? They have their teeth, they've lost the thrust reflex, which means that they're not throwing food out of their mouths, which is that reflex that babies have so that they don't choke. They've lost that, and they're really interested in what you're eating. If that's happening, then I would say, let's try a little bit of solid food now.
Yeah. Yeah, they're going to give you some signals of
Absolutely.
Of when they're ready, and, moms can just pick up on that and start the fun, start the adventure.
Sure, the adventure of food, as I call it.
Yeah. One last question I wanted to close with is kind of if you could clarify for us about using supplements and vitamins or water with babies under a year old and if it's necessary.
Okay. In general, I would say it's not necessary. If your baby is formula fed, it's definitely not necessary. All of those vitamins are in the formula. If you're breastfeeding, you should be having such a great diet that your baby doesn't need supplements. The only thing that your baby would need if it's a breastfed baby is vitamin D. Vitamin D is recommended 1 week after they're born until they're weaned. And always, check with your pediatrician. You can always have your baby tested to see what their vitamin levels are. The only baby that I would really monitor carefully would be a baby that's raised on a vegan diet, which definitely can be done, but it has to be really very, very well controlled. Those babies usually are lacking in vitamin B12, iron, zinc, calcium, and omega-3. So moms just need to be very aware of that. Water. Breastfed babies do not need additional water. In fact, too much water can actually be detrimental. Even if it's hot outside, breast milk is mainly water, so they do not need extra water. A formula-fed baby, if it's very hot, you might want to give your baby water. The rule of thumb is no more than 2 ounces of water in a 24-hour period for babies under 6 months.
Okay. And what about between 6 and 12 months?
6 and 12 months, it really sort of depends on how much solid food they're eating. Mm-hmm. So if they're eating more solid food, they could have a little bit more water. But as long as they're still, on breast milk and formula, the amount of water that they're going to be drinking is really minimal.
Okay. I had a question about the vitamin D supplementation in a breastfed baby. If a mother is supplementing herself with vitamin D, which I would recommend for most breastfeeding women, especially in the United States, we tend to be very vitamin D deficient. Why does the vitamin D not pass through into the breast milk?
It does, but as we were saying earlier, the baby gets most of it and then the mom gets it. So, we're splitting our vitamin D between the two. The vitamin D that is getting absorbed in the mom and also the breast milk. So it's sometimes still that the baby is deficient in that. And I would just always check with the pediatrician.
Yeah. Just
to make sure that the levels are right. And I just think that everyone should check and have their vitamin D levels checked. It's a really important nutrient.
Simple blood test, exactly.
It's a simple blood test. It's really easy. And, the recommendation is 400 units between 1 week old and the time they're weaned, but definitely every baby's individual. Every mom is taking vitamin D supplements or not, so it's good to have your baby tested.
Yeah, okay, that makes a lot of sense. Any last closing thoughts that you'd like to share?
Oh, no, just I just hope you all have enjoy the adventure of feeding your baby. Don't get crazy about it. Don't stress about it. If you have questions, call a nutritionist. And, this is an exciting time. This first year of a baby's life is just so amazing.
Yeah, it's really about enjoying that time, right, that first year, because it does go by so fast. And it is about making conscious, thoughtful decisions regarding nutrition and what you're putting in your body and your baby's body without being overly analytical regarding every little detail, and just recognizing that you're doing the best you can on limited space, and, maybe even getting support from family and friends with helping with food preparation. For example, for Mom, those first few weeks after giving birth, where her diet is so hugely important for her healing as well as for producing this nutritious breast milk. So, don't be afraid to reach out and get help regarding meals. No,
I think it's really important that new moms, in that fourth trimester, really get some help and support. And, it'll just, because that fourth trimester, I think for most moms, it's really about building her strength up and bonding with her baby. So, give a lot over, delegate. That's a good time to be delegating.
It's a wonderful time for that. Well, Laura, thank you so much for coming on today.
Thank you.
And, I want to remind everyone that they can get more information from your online courses at your website, lauralacey.com.
Absolutely. Great. Thank you so much for having me. It was fun. Take care.
All right. Bye.
Bye-bye.